The first thing they saw was the shadow. It swallowed the hospital parking lot in the middle of a bright, ordinary Tuesday morning, scattering dry leaves and rattling the windows of Mercy Ridge Medical Center. Nurses froze mid-step. Patients looked up from wheelchairs. And the group of smug interns standing near the entrance, the same ones who had spent months mocking the quiet single-dad nurse, went pale as the thunder of rotors split the daylight sky. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their uniform, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Whispertales 3. Stories like this remind us why compassion still matters. Elias Mercer had just finished cleaning a frail elderly man after a difficult night shift. His scrubs were slightly wrinkled, his eyes ringed with exhaustion, but his hands were steady and gentle. He moved with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen worse things than hospital chaos. No one here knew just how much worse. To most of the staff, Elias was an oddity. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s working as a nurse in the pediatric and trauma rotation. He packed his daughter's lunch before dawn every day, braided her thick curls with careful fingers, and walked her to the bus stop before driving to work in his aging blue sedan. He rarely joined the staff for lunch. He skipped happy hour invitations. He left promptly at the end of his shift to pick up his 7-year-old daughter, Maris. They whispered about him. Some thought he had failed at something bigger. Others joked that he must have washed out of the military because of the old trident tattoo peeking from beneath his sleeve. The younger interns, arrogant, polished, and loud, openly mocked him in the break room. They laughed about how a man that built should have stayed in combat instead of playing house with thermometers and juice boxes. Elias heard every word. He never responded. What they didn't see were the nightmares that jolted him awake at 2:13 a.m., the sound of distant explosions echoing in his mind long after the war was over. They didn't see the folded flag tucked in the top drawer of his dresser, or the photograph of his wife, Tamsin, smiling in the golden light of a beach sunset. Tamsin had been the one who steadied him after years in the shadows. She had believed in the gentle man behind the hardened soldier. And when cancer took her swiftly and cruelly, Elias had promised her one thing in the sterile silence of the ICU. He would be there for Maris. Fully. Completely. No more deployments. No more disappearing acts. That promise was why he left the teams. Before Mercy Ridge, Elias had been something else entirely. A Navy SEAL with over a decade of service, deployed in places he never spoke about. He had led missions in darkness most people couldn't imagine. He had carried wounded brothers through gunfire. He had made impossible choices and lived with them. But when Tamsin got sick, he had filed his paperwork without hesitation. Some men chase glory. Elias chose bedtime stories and school recitals. The teasing intensified when one of the interns, a sharp-tongued resident named Bryce Holloway, discovered his military background. Bryce found an old online article about a classified mission credited vaguely to Mercer and his unit. He twisted the story, turning respect into ridicule, suggesting Elias had probably exaggerated his service. The laughter that followed cut deeper than Elias expected, not because it hurt his pride, but because it threatened the quiet life he had built. Still, he stayed silent. Until the helicopter came. The morning sun was high and brilliant when the rhythmic thunder rolled over the hospital. Curtains fluttered violently. Nurses rushed toward windows. Outside, a dark Navy helicopter descended with controlled urgency, flattening grass and sending dust swirling in frantic circles. Security scrambled. Hospital administrators rushed out in confusion. Elias felt it before he saw it. A vibration in his chest. A memory waking up. He stepped outside, shielding his eyes against the rotor wash. The helicopter settled onto the asphalt with precision, engines roaring like an old war cry. The side door slid open, revealing two uniformed Navy officers and a medic gripping a stretcher. On that stretcher lay a man barely conscious, blood soaking through makeshift bandages. His dog tags swung loosely against his chest. Commander Rowan Vance. Elias hadn't seen him in 6 years. Rowan had been his commanding officer, his mentor, the man who once dragged Elias out of a collapsing compound when shrapnel tore through his shoulder. The kind of leader who never left a man behind. Now Rowan's face was pale beneath streaks of dirt and dried blood. His breathing was shallow. The senior officer scanned the crowd, eyes landing on Elias with unmistakable recognition. There was no hesitation in his stride as he approached. The mocking interns watched in stunned silence as the officer stopped directly in front of the single-dad nurse. He saluted. The crisp motion cut through the morning air like a blade. He said they had requested Mercer by name. A mission off the coast had gone wrong. Rowan had been critically injured during extraction. He had lost a dangerous amount of blood. The nearest military hospital was too far. The pilot had rerouted to Mercy Ridge for one reason. Rowan had whispered one name before losing consciousness. Elias. In that instant, every whisper, every smirk, every sideways glance dissolved into irrelevance. Elias stepped forward without drama, without ego. His voice was calm, issuing precise medical instructions as if no time had passed at all. Trauma Bay 3 was cleared. Supplies were gathered. The interns who once mocked him now followed his commands instinctively, drawn by the authority they had never recognized. Inside the trauma room, Elias moved like a man who remembered both battlefields and hospital wards. He assessed Rowan's wounds with steady hands. A punctured lung. Internal bleeding. He coordinated with surgeons, relayed vitals, stabilized airways. His focus never wavered. Hours blurred into a tense, breathless stretch of time. Outside, the helicopter waited like a sentinel. When the surgery finally ended, the lead surgeon removed his mask and nodded. Rowan would live. Elias stepped into the quiet hallway, exhaustion settling into his bones. That was when Bryce approached him, no trace of mockery left in his expression. Only shame. Bryce admitted he had misjudged him. He had assumed weakness where there was sacrifice. He had mistaken silence for failure. Elias didn't respond with anger. He simply said that real strength isn't loud. It shows up when it's needed. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Not as gossip, but as awe. Staff members began to see him differently, not as the odd single-dad nurse, but as a man who had chosen love over applause. In the following weeks, small things changed. The whispers stopped. Respect replaced ridicule. Nurses asked about Mercer's school projects. Someone left a thank you note in his locker for the way he had handled the trauma case. But the real moment that mattered came days later when Rowan, pale but recovering, asked for Elias at his bedside. The commander thanked him not just for saving his life, but for proving that stepping away from war did not make him less of a warrior. It made him brave in a different way. That afternoon, Elias left the hospital on time. The sky was bright and clear. He picked up Maris from school, her backpack nearly as big as she was. She ran into his arms, unaware of helicopters or heroics, knowing only that her father was there. As they walked home hand in hand, Elias realized something profound. The world might measure men by titles and noise. But the truest victories are quiet ones, the promises kept, the lives healed, the children raised with love. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that humility and strength can live in the same soul, please like, share, and comment to let us know. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And before we close, comment the word respect if you believe every parent fighting silent battles deserves honor. Because sometimes, the man they mock in daylight is the hero who once walked through fire, and chose to come home.